So the question that I wanted to ask, because Brennan, he writes in this one chapter on fear about basically the three big threats that we have to overcome, the three-headed hydra. And the last one that he writes about is division, the sense that we're different from people, the sense that nobody is like us, the sense of like we have to defend ourselves against each other and pull each other down so that we don't feel as bad, and all these thoughts that can creep up. And you already started going a little bit into that with those stories, because what I wanted to ask you is somebody who's been around the world, who's seen so many different cultures, who's really been open to so many new ideas, is how can we heal the sense of division that we just see at so many places in the world?
Brilliant question. First of all, I'm really glad that you asked, because right now it's an important time to be asking that kind of a question. It first has to start with the belief that it's possible. You got to believe that it's possible. And then you put that into the search engine of your mind, the Google of your mind. Say, well, if I really believe this is possible, then your search engine mind will start looking for solutions that will help fulfill that.
Mhm.
But if you don't believe it's possible, then what's you're gonna put that into your search engine of your mind, and that's what it's going to find is evidence for why it's not possible. So it's very important for people to be aware of what they're searching for. What are they reinforcing a belief that it's not possible, or are they building information or gathering information for why it is possible? Starts there. Now, I know it's possible because I've seen it. I've witnessed it. I've experienced that story I was just telling you about was a small example of that.
Mhm.
Um, it's possible in Germany. You know that, right? You guys overcame horrendous obstacles and challenges to rebuild yourself as a country. None of us are perfect. None of us ever will be. But that doesn't deny us the ambition and the desire and the want to be better versions of ourselves, to be good people, to contribute, to create a community that feels good about itself, that feels safe enough to love people. Ooh, there's a quote. Pull that one out, right? That feels safe enough to love people, because that's a very important component of it too. And the reason why I'm so clear about this in particular, Lucas, is I went to Rwanda to spend some time to learn about the genocide. If you're familiar with that, maybe you've even seen the movie Hotel Rwanda. And if you haven't, you ought to see it, because that can teach you what happens when we stop loving each other and we start gathering evidence for why we're different and why we're better, or why we're better than somebody else. Horrendous, horrible time, the genocide of 94 in Rwanda. And I remember that in 94, and I was living in Seattle at that point in time. And I remember I disengaged with it because I couldn't understand it, and it haunted me. So I went there to confront with what I wasn't willing to be engaged with or confront at that point in time. And I spent about a month there. Now you can only get so much in a month. I'll give that. But I went back to Rwanda several times, actually. Even lived there for 7.5 months working for the scientists. I live with mountain gorillas, working for the scientists who studied the gorillas as a field correspondent. But I went there to learn about that, and I learned stories, how they found ways to heal and come together. I learned about a woman who was growing coffee with her neighbor, and her neighbor actually had murdered her parents. And I remember, and I was actually taking photos of this because there was somebody that was, um, CNN was doing a story about it, and I was asked to take photos for their story.
Mhm.
And I remember her talking about, like, well, is it easy? No. But what are the choices? I could sit here with resentment and anger, uh, and have it be a cancer that eats me away from the inside, or I can find a way to forgive. Doesn't mean forget, but to forgive and find a way to find enough common ground to realize that we actually need each other to survive. And if that woman can find that kind of grace in her heart, we can find grace in our political conversations in our hearts to find common ground to make us a better place.
Wow. And
Good.
just one thing that came to my mind as you were also talking to Germany and me being here and having the experience, one thing that I would add to that is that it's also always a constant work in progress. It's not
Mm.
like, oh, we've healed division, everything's good now.
Right. Check. Doesn't work that way. No.
Exactly. Because just as with everything, if we rest on our laurels too much there, it just starts right back into dipping back
It,
into
it
the negative.
it creeps back in. That's why understanding and studying, celebrating, knowing history is important, because then it helps us appreciate why we need to do certain things, why
Hmm.
we need to have certain conversations and dialogues, so we don't have to relearn certain horrible lessons over and over again. And that can happen that way. But we have to, you know, the work, it's just work, but it's work that's worth it. It's not a waste of time. It's work that challenges us to learn and grow, to be congruent with the divineness of what life made us to be.
Hmm.
And that's a choice. That's as in the, if you want to go down the path of the faiths, that's the choice of free will. That's the choice of our own um, mindset along the way. We either feed the ego or we feed the light that's within us. Choose which one serves us to be better, which one makes the best contribution. And some people are so covered over. I mean, in Rwanda, the only thing I could come to some kind of understanding was their hearts got covered up with so much darkness that there was not much light. It was still there, but it was so covered over that they couldn't connect with it without some serious work on themselves. And they're still finding their way. I don't want to oversimplify it, but they every year, the first week of April, they honor all of those who lost their lives in the genocide of Rwanda on both sides. They march through the streets for a week. They wear purple. They march in silence. So people don't forget that some people paid a big price to get us to this point, and we owe it to them to do our part. That's what I think.